Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of web scraping with Python. You've sent us some awesome resources about two really popular tools, BeautifulSoup and Scrapy. So let's take a look and figure out what each one brings to the table. It's like you're standing there in a hardware store and you need to gather data from the web, but which tool is the right one for the job?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Choosing between Beautiful Soup and Scrapy isn't really about just picking the best one outright. It's
Mhm.
more about figuring out which one is the best fit for your specific web scraping project.
Okay, so let's break it down. Our sources describe BeautifulSoup as a parsing library and Scrapy as a framework. Now, I get that libraries are basically collections of pre-written code, but what exactly does it mean for Beautiful Soup to be a parsing library?
Well, imagine you have this big, messy web page full of HTML code. Beautiful Soup is like a super precise filter. It helps you go through all that code and extract only the specific data that you need. Think of it like using a metal detector to find treasure buried on a beach, right? It helps you ignore all the sand and zero in on the valuable stuff.
So Beautiful Soup is for those targeted extractions, but Scrapy is more of a one-stop shop for web scraping, is that right?
Exactly. Scrapy is a framework which means it provides a structured environment and all the tools you need to build a complete web scraping project from start to finish. Think of it like an assembly line. You have all these stations set up to handle the different tasks, like gathering data, processing it, and then storing it.
Okay, I got it. So Beautiful Soup is kind of like a scalpel, precise and perfect for smaller tasks, while Scrapy is more like a full-blown construction crew ready to handle those larger scale projects.
Perfect analogy.
Our sources mention that Beautiful Soup is known for being very beginner friendly. Is it really that easy to pick up?
Absolutely. Beautiful Soup has a really intuitive design and fantastic documentation. You could literally install it and start extracting data from simple websites within minutes.
Wow, that's impressive. But our sources also highlight Scrapy's superior speed, especially when you're dealing with those large-scale scraping projects. Can you quantify that difference?
Absolutely. In recent benchmarks, Scrapy consistently processed web pages 3 times faster than Beautiful Soup. So if you're working on a project that involves scraping thousands or even tens of thousands of pages, that speed difference can really add up. We're talking saving hours or even days of processing time.
Whoa, that's a huge difference. Okay, so for massive data gathering, Scrapy seems to be the clear winner in terms of speed. What about the range of features each tool offers?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Scrapy comes packed with built-in features that Beautiful Soup just doesn't have. For example, Scrapy has this thing called built-in crawling. It's like having a tireless web spider that automatically follows links on a website and discovers new pages to scrape. It can handle a lot of the exploration for you.
That sounds incredibly useful, especially if you're dealing with a huge website with lots of pages.
Exactly. And on top of that, Scrapy has something called asynchronous support, which basically means it can handle multiple requests at the same time. Think of it like having a whole team of people working on different parts of the project all at once, rather than one person doing everything one step at a time.
Wow.
This just makes the whole scraping process so much faster and more efficient.
Okay, so Scrapy is like a multitasking master, but what about Beautiful Soup? Does it offer any similar features?
While Beautiful Soup is amazing for its parsing capabilities, you would actually need to bring in some additional libraries if you wanted to implement things like crawling or asynchronous requests. It's like needing to buy those separate attachments for your power tool to handle all the different tasks.
So it's more of a DIY approach with Beautiful Soup. You get the core functionality, but you have to build out the rest yourself if you need those more advanced features.
Precisely. It all comes down to the scale and complexity of your web scraping project.
Now let's jump into some real-world examples to see how these tools perform in action. Our sources mention an e-commerce company that initially used Beautiful Soup for price monitoring, but they eventually ended up switching over to Scrapy. Why was that?
Well, they had this need to scrape data from dozens of websites regularly. And they also needed to manage these complex sessions and then verify all the collected data to make sure it was accurate. Beautiful Soup just wasn't really designed to handle that level of sophistication and workload. Scrapy, on the other hand, offered this really robust and structured framework that could actually handle the scale and the complexity of their whole operation. It was a total game changer for their business.
It sounds like they hit the limits of what Beautiful Soup could do, and Scrapy was able to provide the power and features they needed to really take their price monitoring to the next level. But our sources also mention a news aggregation startup that successfully used Beautiful Soup for their MVP. They were scraping data from like 20 news websites every hour. How do they manage to do that with Beautiful Soup?
Well, in their case, the speed of development and simplicity were their top priorities. They really needed to get their product up and running very quickly with a small team and limited resources. Beautiful Soup's ease of use and flexibility allowed them to build and refine their scraper super rapidly, focusing on their core functionality first.
So it seems like they strategically chose Beautiful Soup for its agility and rapid development capabilities.
Exactly. It was the perfect tool for them at that stage. It allowed them to validate their idea and get their product to market really quickly, even though they weren't working on a massive scale.
That's a great example of choosing the right tool for the right job. So, for our listeners who are trying to decide between Beautiful Soup and Scrapy, are there any clear guidelines they can follow?
Absolutely. Think about what you're trying to accomplish. If you're new to web scraping, you need results quickly, or you're working with simpler websites, Beautiful Soup is an excellent place to start.
That makes sense. It's like choosing a simple hand tool for a quick repair around the house. You don't need that whole workshop full of equipment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you're building a large-scale scraper, something that needs to be super reliable, robust, and able to handle those more complex scenarios, then Scrapy is definitely the way to go.
It's like choosing professional grade equipment for building a house. You need tools that are designed for those heavier duty tasks.
Precisely. And here's a key distinction. While Beautiful Soup excels at parsing, Scrapy is really an engine designed for heavy lifting and web scraping. It's built to handle that whole process, from crawling to processing and then storing data.
Okay, so we've covered the individual strengths of Beautiful Soup and Scrapy, but our sources mention something called a hybrid approach. Is it actually possible to use both of these tools together? And if so, when would that even make sense?
That's where things get really interesting. You can actually kind of combine those strengths of both tools. Imagine using Beautiful Soup's parsing precision to handle really tricky HTML structures and then just seamlessly feed that extracted data into Scrapy's powerful processing pipelines.
Wow, I never even thought about combining them like that. That opens up a whole new world of possibilities. It's like having the best of both worlds.
Exactly. It's becoming a pretty popular technique among those experienced web scrapers. They're realizing they don't always have to choose one or the other. They can actually use both strategically and create these super efficient and powerful scraping setups.
So it's not just about knowing how to use each tool by itself, it's also about knowing how to orchestrate them, like conducting an orchestra of web scraping tools.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Now let's dive into some insights from developers who are actually using these tools out in the field.
One of the sources mentioned a developer who built a large-scale news aggregation system using Beautiful Soup. Wait a minute, you mean they're running a massive operation with what we thought was just for smaller projects? How is that even possible?
It's actually a fascinating case study. It really challenges that common perception that Beautiful Soup is only suitable for small-scale scraping. This developer was really clever. They combined Beautiful Soup with other tools like Tor for IP masking and Phantom.js for handling dynamic content.
Hold on. What exactly is dynamic content?
Think about those websites where the content changes based on how the user interacts with it, like those infinite scrolling pages you see on social media. Those were powered by JavaScript, and Beautiful Soup can't really handle that on its own. But this developer integrated Phantom.js, which is a tool that can actually render JavaScript, and that allowed him to overcome that limitation.
So they basically built their own custom scraping system by combining all these different tools. It's like they put together a whole team of specialists, each with their own unique skills, to tackle this complex scraping challenge.
Exactly. And the most impressive part, this system has been running flawlessly for over 4 years. It's a testament to this developer's creativity and the potential of Beautiful Soup to handle way more than people might think.
That story is so inspiring. It shows that with a deep understanding of those web scraping techniques and a willingness to kind of think outside the box, you can achieve some really amazing things. But our sources also mentioned developers who started with Scrapy, but eventually switched back to Beautiful Soup for simpler projects. Why would they do that?
Well, they realized that for their specific needs, Scrapy's complexity wasn't really justified. They found themselves spending more time configuring and managing that framework than actually writing the scraping logic. Sometimes a simpler tool like Beautiful Soup is all you really need to get the job done efficiently.
So it's kind of like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It might be powerful, but it's totally overkill for the task at hand.
Exactly. It's all about evaluating the complexity of your project and then choosing the tool that strikes that perfect balance between power and ease of use. Don't feel pressured to use a complex tool just because it's trendy or super popular, right? Choose the one that really fits your needs.
Speaking of experienced developers, our sources mention a trend of seeing Scrapy as more of an engine than just a scraper. What does that even mean?
It's a really fascinating shift in perspective. Instead of thinking of Scrapy as the tool that does all the scraping, they see it as the orchestrator, like the manager of the whole operation. They might use simpler tools like BeautifulSoup for the actual parsing, and then feed that data into Scrapy's powerful pipelines for processing, filtering, and storing it.
Okay, so they're using Scrapy to manage the workflow and leverage its robust features for handling those large-scale operations, but they're not actually using it for the granular task of parsing the HTML.
Exactly. It's about playing to the strengths of each tool and creating this sophisticated system where every component works together seamlessly.
It's like building a high-performance race car. You wouldn't use the same engine for a compact city car and a Formula One race car, would you?
Precisely. You choose the engine that's best suited for the specific demands of the race. And in the world of web scraping, you choose the tools that best fit the scale, complexity, and goals of your project.
We've covered a ton of ground today, from the fundamental differences between BeautifulSoup and Scrapy to the exciting possibilities of hybrid approaches and those insights from really experienced developers. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of what's possible.
And that's the beauty of web scraping, right? There's always something new to learn, new techniques to explore, and a new challenge to conquer.
Speaking of learning, our sources include some excellent documentation and resources for both BeautifulSoup and Scrapy. What are some key resources our listeners should check out if they want to dive deeper into these tools?
The official documentation for both BeautifulSoup and Scrapy is definitely a great place to start. It's really comprehensive and well written. They have these really detailed explanations of each tool's functionality, along with tons of practical examples to help you get up and running quickly.
And for those who prefer a more hands-on approach, there are tons of tutorials and online courses available. You can literally find anything from those beginner-friendly introductions to even the more advanced techniques for building those sophisticated scrapers.
And don't underestimate the power of community. The web scraping community is incredibly active and supportive. You'll find forums, there's discussion boards, and even online groups where you can actually connect with other web scrapers, share experiences, and even get help if you run into any roadblocks.
It's like having a global network of web scraping mentors right at your fingertips. I love that.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions, and learn from those who have already walked the web scraping path.
I think it's about time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we do, we want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. As we conclude our exploration of BeautifulSoup and Scrapy, which tool will you choose for your next web scraping project? And have you even considered the incredible power of combining them both for a truly unstoppable scraping setup?
It all comes down to understanding the unique strengths of each tool and picking the one that aligns perfectly with the needs of your project.
It's like having a toolbox full of specialized tools. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw, would you?
Exactly. The key is to look at the task and then choose the right tool for the job.
And, sometimes the best approach involves using multiple tools together.
Just like a really skilled craftsperson who can move between different tools seamlessly to create a masterpiece.
I love that analogy. It highlights the fact that web scraping isn't just about knowing how to use a particular tool, but understanding that broader landscape of all the different techniques and strategies.
It's about becoming a web scraping maestro, conducting that symphony of data extraction.
Okay, so we've definitely sparked that curiosity in our listeners. But where can they go to continue this web scraping journey? Our sources mention some pretty great documentation and learning resources for both BeautifulSoup and Scrapy.
The official documentation for both tools is incredibly detailed and well written. They offer a lot of explanations about each tool's functionality, and they even include tons of examples to help you get started.
And for those who like a more hands-on learning experience, there are so many tutorials and online courses available. You can find anything from the basics to those more advanced techniques for building those really complex scrapers.
And don't forget about the power of community. The web scraping community is so active and supportive. You'll find all kinds of forums, discussion boards, and online groups where you can connect with other web scrapers, share your experiences, and get help with any roadblocks you encounter.
It's like having this amazing global network of web scraping mentors right there at your disposal.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions, and learn from those who have already been down this path.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of Beautiful Soup and Scrapy today. We've gone over their strengths, looked at some real-world examples, and even glimpsed the potential of combining their powers.
And we've really only just begun to uncover the vast potential of web scraping. The web is a huge ocean of data just waiting to be explored.
So to all of our listeners out there, keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with these awesome tools.
Remember, with the right tools and a curious mind, you can unlock so much valuable information from the web.
And that's it for our deep dive into Beautiful Soup and Scrapy.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the world of data.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. So to our listeners, we encourage you to continue learning, experimenting, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible with these powerful tools.
Remember, with the right tools and a curious mind, you can unlock a treasure trove of valuable insights from the web.
That's it for this deep dive into the world of web scraping with Beautiful Soup and Scrapy.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of data.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.